think we're live.
Hello and welcome, and thank you for coming, and thank you for joining me. I am having a conversation today with a brand new friend, Fay the Most Gracious. Welcome, Fay.
Hi.
And I have watched some of Fay's content, and I have appeared with Fay on a stream on another channel. But I have never had Fay on my channel before, and so I consider her a new friend. Fay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I think some of the people that you have in the live chat are quite regulars of mine as well, but I'll introduce myself just for posterity, I guess. My name is Fay. I go by Fay the Most Gracious on YouTube and on Twitter. I talk a lot about ex-Muslim issues, but I trying to just become a mainstream influencer as well, because I think that would be the best way to spread my message. I do a lot of advocacy against blasphemy laws, for free speech, and for women's rights, especially when it comes to Middle Eastern politics. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, very good. And I agree with you so much. I've had a couple of people ask me what my niche is, and I say I really don't have one, because there's a number of issues I like to talk about. I like to talk about transgender issues. I like to talk about women's issues. Obviously I like to talk about religious issues. But yeah, I have interest in a number of different things as well. Fay, I know that you are an ex-Muslim, and I know that that is a big part of your story. Why don't you share some of your story and what it's like to be an ex-Muslim?
So when it comes to telling my story, it's never easy because there's just so many parts. But to give the general summary of where I'm at right now, so I'm fully disowned from my family for four main reasons. A, because I reported my father for domestic violence. B, because I refused to have an arranged marriage. C, because I left Islam as of 2017, but officially in 2018. And D, because I am bisexual. So I am just a fully fledged sinner in their eyes. I'm no longer part of my family. And the way in which I live now, I live extremely independently, and it's good and bad. I think that in a sense that it's allowed me to really, really come into my own. It allows me a lot of time to introspect and build a life for myself, and explore a lot, because I do think that if I was attached to my family, even if they did accept me, I'd still be limited in a lot of ways and with a lot of responsibilities being the oldest. And obviously it's generally kind of miserable as well, because I have a lot of siblings, and I haven't seen them in 5 years. I don't get to do all the family stuff that normal families do. So it's I think there's pros and cons to it, but that's the general summary.
Okay. Now, do you live in this? Does your family live in a different country?
No, most of my family are based here in the UK, although some are back home in Bangladesh and some are in the States.
Okay. Okay. Is there any difference between family members that are in different countries? Do you find certain countries are a little more accepting of you than others?
I've been I've been disowned across the board. It's more so I'm more accepted among the youngest, but they're not allowed to talk to me. They secretly get in contact with me.
Okay.
So I'm more accepted among the youngest, but the older people just don't interact with me at all.
Okay. So I imagine that is difficult.
It is, but it's kind of become my normal life. I tend to feel it more around family holidays. So around so Muslim holidays would include like Eid or Ramadan, which are the Muslim festivals or celebrations or practice in general. So I'd feel it more around there, but generally speaking, this has become my normal life since I've been disowned since 2018. So it's been about 2 years, and I'm just trying to move on as much as possible.
Okay. Have you been able to make a number of friends that are now supporting you?
I think I am susceptible to making a lot of friends very quickly, and I don't necessarily think that it's a good thing because I trauma bond with people. And it's something that I'm working through slowly. I'm trying to be a bit more guarded in who I accept into my friendship circle and who I sort of keep on sort of like a professional relationship with. So I've made a very strong unit of close friends and a much larger circle of sort of professional acquaintances, and that helps a lot. I do have to say.
Okay. And what is your profession?
I do a number of things. So I'm currently studying social psychology. I'm doing it part time, so it's going to take a little bit longer than a standard degree. And I'm hoping to also move on to do a master's later after my degree is completed so that I can work with teenagers. And I currently work in schools with students who have learning difficulties and behavioral issues. And that's what I would like to do in future if I don't make it as a public figure. Um, I also aspire to do some writing, become published as an author, uh, but that I think that will all come with time, hopefully.
Okay. In your seeking to be a public figure, are you looking at politics?
I I I I don't know necessarily if I want to be a political public figure. I kind of just want to be an influencer, like a YouTube influencer, like an online
Okay.
personality. That's more so what I'm aiming for, so that I have a wider audience to represent my ideas to, and all of the things that I frequently talk about, because I think that the issues that I bring up aren't widely, they may not be widely known, but they're also not widely spoken about, and that concerns me a lot because it has a lot to do with things that are going on to the east rather than UK and US politics.
Okay. And since you mentioned that one of your biggest aims is to build your platform,
Mm.
Amiga Nuts is in the chat, and he is the king of shills. And so I'm going to ask Amiga Nuts to grab your the link to your channel and post it in the chat, and I'm sure he'll do that for us. And I think most people who are subscribed to me are already subscribed to you, but just in case there's anyone out there, or after we're done, I will post this to my Facebook as well, and some family members might see this that might decide to come and thank you, Critical Cripple. Some family members might subscribe to you as well, and so maybe we can build your platform here in the U.S. a little bit.
Thank you, Granny Kelly. I deeply appreciate it. You don't have to get me anything for Christmas this year.
Now, you brought up an issue earlier today about a person in Pakistan who is facing difficulty. Tell us a little bit about this person and what his difficulties are.
So I don't want to mention names or display any pictures at the moment because we don't know what his situation is, and I really hope he's found a safe house for now. But this young man has recently been doxxed, allegedly for posting some blasphemous stuff around the Prophet Muhammad. And for those of you who may not know, Pakistan has quite severe blasphemy laws. It still carries the death penalty for blasphemy. As far as I'm aware, this young man is a minor. So we are very concerned, and we're trying to get as much exposure as we can for him, so that the organizations like BUNHCR, Humanist UK, Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain take this case and treat it seriously. Unfortunately, in a lot of countries, seeking refuge for consciousness or for religious freedom is not a major reason. And it's difficult to make the judges see that it is important, especially when we have 11 or so countries that still execute or imprison severely people who commit blasphemy or apostate from Islam. And these countries include Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and a few others around the world. So I think that Granny has linked a thread that I've made down below. I would really, really appreciate it if you shared that thread around. And the main point of that thread is to just report the accounts that are calling for this young man's death because they are actively reporting him to the FIA, which is like a secret service or a big brother service in Pakistan. So that's what I would like to share.
Okay. Um, Now, what can be done for this young man?
There isn't there isn't a whole lot that the online community can do except get the word out. But what we hope to do is get him either amnesty in an embassy or to a Western country where he'll be safe. Uh,
Mhm.
then it might be more likely for him since he is underage, or he appears to be quite young. But as of here and now, there just isn't too much that you and I can do. I've forwarded the information to all the relevant channels, so they are handling it. A few of us in the background who know who this person is, we're trying to be there for him support, but I think that's as much as we can do. As of here and now, what I would really encourage that everyone does is to try and report the tweets or posts that exist throughout the internet calling for the death of this man or the arrest of this young man. Because the last thing we need is the mob to get a hold of him. Like his picture and his name is everywhere at this point, and it's just worrying.
Okay. How quickly do things like this take place? I mean, once they put out his picture, is there an arrest and a trial, or is it usually kind of a mob type thing?
It it can be a sort of mob type thing. The last we heard, so just before I jumped on this stream, because we were trying to follow the story as much as we could, it's very, very likely at this point that everyone, because the location was doxed as well, that everyone in his local area would know who he is and his family would be aware of it by now. And with the high rates of honor violence and honor killings that happen especially in the Indian subcontinent, it's a really, really dangerous thing. So by now, it would be most likely that the people in his village and in his area know who he is.
Mm.
Um, in terms of how quickly the FIA or the police would get in touch, I'm not entirely sure. The last time that we looked at statistics, there were about 40 reported cases of people being kept on death row for blasphemy. But that might just be, we don't know how underestimated those numbers are because this isn't widely reported.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of the things I was really wondering is how prevalent is this, and is it more of a problem in some countries than others?
So, as mentioned, there are about 11 to 13 countries that still have blasphemy laws operationally. Technically, a lot of countries did have blasphemy laws that weren't in operation. Like I think in the UK, we had blasphemy laws up until like 2006 or something, but they weren't operational.
Okay.
Um, so, in terms of operational blasphemy laws, those exist in about 11 to 13 countries. But they aren't widely reported by like Amnesty or like the UN because I'm not entirely sure for what reason. Sometimes it's just underreported by the countries. Sometimes there just aren't investigations into it. One of the biggest cases of like a blasphemy trial is the case of Asia Bibi, who was a Christian woman who said some blasphemous stuff about the Prophet Muhammad. And she was in prison for about 7 to 9 years.
Mhm.
She was actually in prison to be put to death. She was on death row, but she was sent to Canada, I think, last year after she won the case. But
Mm.
she was taken away from her family. We have the case of Sahel Arabi, who's in prison for now. I think been on and off death row for about 8 years now for saying he's a journalist. He said some stuff about the Prophet Muhammad. He's been on and off death row for 8 years. I think his mother's also in prison now for trying to get him out. He was forcibly divorced from his family. He hasn't seen his daughter in 8 years. He went on hunger strike earlier this year, and we've just not heard anything since. Um, and it's just really, really deplorable. There are about 12 feminists, Muslim feminists, I might add, rotting away and being tortured in Saudi prisons right now. And they just wanted, as most feminists do, equal rights. And it's a scary world outside the West.
Okay. Now, are the blasphemy laws applied to other religions or only to Islam? So if somebody said something against, say, Jesus, would that be an issue?
I don't know exactly. Jesus is, we have a version of Jesus in Islam, so I don't know how that would be handled.
Hmm.
Uh, but Christians, in terms of Pakistan, Christians and a lot of smaller Muslim sects like Ahmadis or Qadianis, they're considered minorities, and they are very heavily mistreated with these blasphemy laws. So religions aren't seen equally in these countries.
Now, in the United States, it is very common to use as an expression things that would be considered blasphemy in other countries.
Mhm.
Um, just saying Jesus Christ when you hit your finger with a hammer. Um, are those kinds of things that are actionable as well, or is it just more blatant, hatred of religion that is
From what
persecuted?
I've seen, in most cases, it's usually talk against Muhammad.
Okay.
Um, that is punished. But honestly, I don't know, because from what I've heard, that people have framed Christian
Mhm.
minorities for committing blasphemy when they may not have even committed it,
Mhm.
get them in trouble, and that's just the problem that exists with a Big Brother society where you can be punished for saying something or thinking differently. And it's not just governments as well. In Bangladesh, a country that I'm from, we don't have the death penalty for blasphemy laws, but we have loads and loads of cases of professors being killed by their students because these professors hold progressive views. Um,
Mm.
in Saudi and in Iran, progressive scholars, progressive teachers are executed yearly en masse. Um, and it's just I really, really don't know how we can get the word out when no one is talking about it. So I would really appreciate people talking about it. We just need to
Mhm.
keep talking about it and getting it into, because I think that a lot of people focus on free speech here in the here and in the US, but that is not a concept that exists in these countries.
Do you think there's a lot of abuse of that in those countries where people will report other people for blasphemy even when they haven't done anything, just as a
Oh,
form of revenge?
absolutely,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. Actually, this case that is going on currently about this boy, it's being rumored that he may not have even said anything. He may have had a falling
Mm.
out with somebody who has now framed him, and has doctored these screenshots. So it's honestly just we don't know what's happening. Whether or not he did it, he should not be put to death for it. Um, it's we're just very stressed about it right now.
Yeah. Well, just to lighten the mood a tad, I'm going to take this comment chat from Nerdy Rodent. What's your favorite blasphemy? And I'm going to let Faye answer first, but I'm also going to take answers from the chat on what's your favorite blasphemy. Faye, what's your favorite?
So my favorite blasphemy that I've done personally is that I've drawn a picture of Muhammad. I
Okay.
actually did a tutorial of how to draw Muhammad. I took some quotations from holy-ish scriptures about his facial proportions and descriptions, and I taught people how to draw him. So if you want to go and check that out, that exists on my channel. I also did like a 15-minute sort of explanation for why I'm drawing Muhammad and why it's important um, to blaspheme. And what we should understand about blasphemy, because I think that a lot of people, when we talk about like essentially taking the piss out of religion, I think a lot of people would say, oh, there's no bridge building involved here. And the idea isn't necessarily to build bridges in this case, it's just to say that we should be allowed to do this without the fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always been an advocate for free speech and free thought. Even when I was practicing Islam, I still had this notion that people should be able to think and feel and say whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can't have a conversation about something, then what is the fucking point? Um, so I drew Muhammad, and it's still one of the proudest things I've done to this day, I think.
Now, I find that interesting. Just drawing the picture is considered blasphemy?
Yes, several. I think Ricardo Oliveira just commented saying that Charlie Hebdo, the shootings that happened at Charlie Hebdo happened because they drew a picture of Muhammad. Though historically, there have been drawings of him, and I do mention this in that video, that
Mm-hmm.
historically some have actually drawn Muhammad, and they actually used to do something similar to Christians, where they would give him like a halo, but it would be a flaming halo. I didn't add that because I didn't want to get in more trouble than was worth. Um, because to draw his head on fire would probably attract a lot more hatred than I need right now.
Yeah.
Uh, but I did try to draw him as proportionately as possible.
Okay, I have an answer from Brainbug. My favorite blasphemy is the entire Tool discography, and I have no idea what that is. Sorry. I'll have to go look that up after the show.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, moving on to another topic. You did a recent video about what's going on in China,
Mhm.
and John Oliver did his show on that topic as well on Sunday. And that also is absolutely horrific. And it has nothing, well, actually, it does have something to do with Islam, but it's not Islamic extremists who are the aggressors in this case. It's the Chinese government. And a lot of people will point to that and say, "See, atheists aren't any better," and they're right. I mean, people are people, and there's people who are oppressive no matter what religion or lack of religion they have. But tell us a little bit about what's going on in China.
So I am not the most informed in everything that's happening in China, but from what I understand, the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, at the moment are they've essentially created a concentration camp for the Uyghurs, or the minority in China. And it's not just comprised of Muslims, there are other minorities included in that, but it's mostly made up of the Chinese Muslim minority. And they are raising what is called hair farms, and they are mutilating people and removing their organs for organ donations and things like that. They are raping women. They're forcing them to take off their hijabs. They're force feeding them pork. It is absolutely horrific. And some of the videos that you see coming out of there, of people being loaded en masse onto these trains, it's very, very reminiscent of the Holocaust. Majid Nawaz has a whole feed about the uh, the atrocities that the CCP government is doing to the Uyghurs in China. So I would really, really advise, like, if you want to get more information on it, to go and check out his feed, because he went on hunger strike for about 5 days so that he could get a petition signed here in the UK for the British Parliament to discuss it, and stop trade with China. And he's also got a list of organizations that have not stopped using Uyghur labor for their company.
Mhm.
Includes Ralph Lauren and a few other companies. So we would strongly advise that you boycott them as well, because they are essentially being um, they are
They're
using
slaves.
slaves and for
Um, yeah, because they're packed up in trains and just taken to other locations where they are forced to work. And as John Oliver explained it, they're told that they are not allowed to escape. And
Mhm.
anytime your employer is using the word escape, uh, you're obviously not employed. You're a
They're not
slave.
employers, these are slavers. They are
Hmm.
slave masters.
Hmm.
Um, and this is all forced labor, and it's not even just forced labor. It is organ harvesting. It is hair farms, where they're just scalping men and women. Um, it's it's absolutely horrific, to the point that at this point I think about 2 to 3 million. I may be wrong on that number, but it's been a while since I've looked at the numbers. 2 to 3 million people have suffered and died under this regime. Um,
Oh my.
so something needs to be done. Governments need to start taking action. If I think that Amiga Nuts just linked my video. If you look at the comment section, it's absolutely
Hmm.
horrific with the excuses that people make for the Chinese government. I do not care what a group of people believe. They should not be treated like, not even like livestock at this point. They're just less than. They don't even have, they're not even being given the respect that any living creature is given on this planet. And it's disgusting that people are making excuses for the CCP government.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, Now, this is done primarily because of their ethnicity.
Mhm.
My understanding is they live in kind of the north western part of China. Do you know what the origin is of the hatred against this people?
I think the excuses that the Chinese government is making is that there have been a lot of terrorist attacks. Now, I'm not
Mm,
entirely sure if there have been. If there are, fair enough, but not fair enough. Actually, that's the wrong word. I
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if there have been as many terrorist attacks as the Chinese government is alleging. Whether or not there have been, this is not the way to deal with radicalism.
Hmm.
Um, if anything, this is going to radicalize Muslims across the world, not just in China, because you are essentially backing people into a corner by encouraging them to act or not act. And it's just disgusting. I think the sort of treatment that they're getting, I think, just comes from a place of pure prejudice. They're different to us. They're a minority. Therefore, we have to subdue them and subjugate them.
Hmm. Yeah, I think Ox is probably right that it's similar to the way that the Native Americans have been treated in this country. That they're you're in the way, and that's we want what you've got, and we'll just move you over here and move you over there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And my understanding is that people are being taken away for the most ridiculous of things, like suspicious activity, and suspicious activity can be as little as you used your back door instead of your front door. Why
yeah.
did you do that?
It kind of operates in the same way that blasphemy laws operate. They're just very, very vague, so they can essentially arrest you for anything, um, as long as they find it shady, I guess. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's a scary world.
It is. It is. And personally, I find the Islamic radicals to be the scariest people on the planet at this point. And I'm really at a loss to understand how it came to be this way. Why did some people within a religion become such scary people, and other people within the same religion, tell us how peaceful their religion is supposed to be. Any thoughts on that?
So, as someone who used to subscribe quite heavily to radicalism, I wasn't a radical myself, but I used to sympathize with those ideas. It definitely comes from a place of there's always someone to fight, and there's always where I think it's a case of people constantly looking at Muslims in a certain way, and then Muslims kind of being like, well, if people think we're like this, then why not? And it certainly isn't
Mm.
helped by the more violent passages in the Quran, because and within the Hadith, which are the two sort of um, main scriptures of Islam.
Mhm.
I think that when you look at the compilation of Islam was revealed over about 23 years, whereas with the Bible, it was collected predominantly after the death of Jesus. So with the Quran, it was sort of revealed in parts during Muhammad's life, and Muhammad was very successful in a lot of things in terms of spreading his religion, and he had about 13 years of like peaceful message spreading, and then he had about 10 years of just abject war and forcing things down people's throats. So the Quran, while it does have some peaceful messaging, it also has the other half of very virulent and very violent preaching. And I think that I think most Muslims, even though they may be conservative, they want to practice their religion quite peacefully. But those who constantly feel like they're under fire and feel threatened want to bring about like a golden age where the whole of the world is governed by Islam and we have a theocracy and all of that stuff, because they sort of romanticize that and they idealize that. Myself, for example, because of the way that war and the glory of dying in battle was talked about when I was a Muslim, I always romanticized those ideas. And I was quite young and I didn't understand anything. And I think that that is the case for a lot of people who are radicalized. They're radicalized quite young, and they're made to subscribe to these ideas, which is why when we see people who've gone from the UK to join things like ISIS, they're never like in their 50s. They're always quite young people who then, go and do this thing. And because they've invested literal blood, sweat, and tears now into the organization, it's very, very difficult for them to admit that this is a sunk cost. So they get invested in it.
Actually, that's not all that different from the history of Christianity as well.
Mhm.
Because here in the United States, there are some radical groups of Christians that, if they had their way, they would be putting people to death. And the primary one is the NIFB Church, the New Independent Fundamentalist Baptist Church, and they very much
Is that
are. Excuse me?
is that Westboro?
No, yes. Well, I think Westboro might be one of them. I'm not sure. But Westboro is very similar to this. This is a particular fundamentalist sect that is very homophobic, and they preach that all homosexual people should be put to death. They preach that women should not be permitted to vote. Women should not be permitted to divorce their husbands. Um, I've done a couple of videos on. I recently did one called "Reverse Consent" on a video from a sermon. I did a response to a sermon that was just horrific in the way that he sets men up, and he actually puts the men over God. Because he says, if your husband tells you to jump off a cliff, you're supposed to do it. And he says this quite literally, with your arms around his neck, kissing his neck, and if you're supposed to obey your husband over God, then that makes your husband more important than God. And these people would be killing homosexuals if they could. And the only thing that stops them is that it is against the law here. And I think that if these, okay, just a minute. Junk Shop says Westboro is more liberal than the NIFB church.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I think if these people could find a place where they could go, a country where it would be acceptable for them to practice their religion this way, they would.
Saudi Arabia,
Um,
most likely.
excuse me?
Saudi Arabia, most likely, as the closest place that kills homosexuals that I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if we look at the history of the church as well, we've got the Spanish Inquisition and we've got the Crusades.
Mhm.
So when people were in power that were in favor of allowing Christians to force their Christianity on other people by physical force, it was done. And so I don't think Christianity really is any different from Islam in that respect. I think it's just that right now that's not acceptable within the Christian religion.
I think that you're right. Though I do find that conflating Christianity with Islam is a little bit problematic because Islam is still going through its Renaissance phase right now.
True.
Christianity has had time to become more mellow and people take it less seriously. Whereas with Islam, the majority of the following is still, even though it might not be violent, it is very, very conservative in its practice. And we still have Islamic theocracies, whereas with Christian theocracies, they don't really exist or operate in the same way that, 15th century Christianity might. Um, so I think that Islam is still very much taken extremely seriously by its following and by others, and it's not held to the same standard as Christianity, and it needs to be. Islam needs to be as irrelevant as Christianity is, and until it is, it's just going to be this doctrine that people will be killed for if they leave.
Mhm. Unfortunately, as we see from the situation in China, though, simply getting rid of religion isn't enough.
No.
Because, if we get rid of religion, we do get rid of blasphemy laws. We get rid of religion as being a method for oppressing people. But people will oppress people, whether it's for religious reasons or not. Yeah.
I don't know what the solutions are. Um, I'm not old enough. I haven't seen enough to know what the solutions are. But I believe in liberal values. I believe in individualism. I believe in free thought, and I do think that the freeness that we have, at least here in the UK, works. Even if it's not perfect, it works, and it allows people to. Because I'm not anti-theistic either. I don't believe in abolishing religion. I think we should take it out of politics.
Hmm.
Um, in
Hmm.
all forms. But I don't think that we should completely get rid of religion, simply because people should be allowed to believe what they want. And I think that with China and the Chinese Communist Party, they are outlawing belief, essentially. And that's what it
Hmm.
looks like. They're outlawing belief in either a very specific religion or religion in general. And we see that with Stalin's regime as well. Historically, he did the same thing where he would persecute Christians. Um, and any level of persecution for those reasons is just unjust. And I don't believe in it.
So, you can almost make a religion of persecuting non-religion as well.
Of course,
Um, and then instead of it being non-religion, it almost becomes a religion in and of itself.
it's still tribalism, it's still groupthink, and it's still otherizing. And I think that's the main problem of religion in general, but also with someone who may subscribe to specific ideologies that otherizes other groups of people. So with if we look at Stalin's regime, he otherized Christians, and that became a problem for us looking back in history, that he persecuted those minorities.
Mhm.
Um, It is the same with China otherizing Muslims or the Uyghurs. It's the same with Islamic countries otherizing apostates and blasphemers. It's the same with these Christian groups in America who otherize gays and homosexuals. Um, it's this inability to accept that people can be different and they should be allowed to be different.
Junk Shop brings up an interesting comment here. He says, I'm not stressed about native or polytheistic religions. It's the monotheistic ones that tend to blow shit up.
Um,
I'm not sure about that.
I wouldn't be too quick to make those assumptions. Vikings were extremely violent. You also had in Myanmar, they have a Buddhist regime that was persecuting Rohingyas who were mainly Muslim. I think that any level of radicalism that otherizes another group of people is bad. It's bad. If there is a system in place that it invites conflict between a majority and a minority, it is bad.
Okay, and Ricardo has an interesting comment here. He says, religious belief and religious government are two different things. And I'm not talking about Shia and Sunni difference.
Agreed. Religious belief is fine. Religious government or religious teachings being in government is bad, is a problem. Because religious politics are not grounded in finding, solutions to problems. They're just grounded on scripture, which is mostly baseless. Yes, funding holds.
One of the, a person that I used to interact with on Twitter, and I eventually ended up blocking him. It was really interesting what happened with him as shortly after Trump did that photo op with the Bible in front of the church, he became extremely emboldened and started tweeting a whole bunch about when the Christians take over. And he was under the impression that, we were going to end up in a theocracy here in the United States. And I ended up reporting him because he started saying things like, when the Christians take over, all of the homosexuals are going to be put to death. When the Christians take over, blasphemy is going to become against the law again. And like I said, I ended up reporting him and blocking him. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that we end up with when people like our government leaders come out in support of one religion over another. And so I think one of the things that's important with the government is to be neutral and not have any particular religion.
I think that this desperation to have theocracies is really, really dangerous. I don't think it's as prevalent with Christianity, though I do see it really alarmingly growing slowly. But this desperation to have a theocracy, I don't think people fully understand the extent of damage that a theocracy will do. If you want to look at theocracies that exist now, look at Iran, look at Saudi Arabia, and look at how they operate with their people. It is not a free society. People are actively killed for very, very little crimes. You can get lashed 80 times in Saudi Arabia for drinking alcohol. And we're not talking about like a slap on the back. We're talking about public physical lashings with blood, gore, you name it, they have it. We're talking about public executions. We're talking about beheadings. We're talking about hangings. We're talking about stonings to death. And these people who are hanging are often left hanging for days to send a message. If you're not into that and you want to look at a more fictional example, look at The Handmaid's Tale. Look at and the way that entire society operates. It is a really, really terrifying fucking idea. It's a really, really terrifying reality that is not just fictional, but exists in this day and age.
Oh yeah,
not something that we should be clamoring for.
Do you consider Israel to be a theocracy?
If I'm being completely honest, I don't know too much about Israel.
Okay.
I, I try to stay out of that argument as much as possible because I have
Mhm.
enough on my plate. But I don't know. Are they a theocracy?
Yeah, it's difficult to say because they do have one religion, the Jewish religion, that is embedded in who they are. But they, as a people, are a Jewish people, and they've always been the religion first and the secular government second.
Mm,
But I don't really see them forcing their religion on other people, but they definitely do persecute gosh, now the word is escaping me. The other people that are the Palestinians.
right.
And I went to Israel a couple years ago, and we had a Christian Palestinian guide. And he told us that because he is both Christian and Palestinian, he is actually permitted to go in all the different areas of the country, which is part of the reason why our group chose him for a guide. But
Mm.
a lot of Christian groups will not accept him as a guide because he is Palestinian.
Oh,
And they insist that no, they won't have a Palestinian. There is a lot of prejudice against the Palestinian people there.
yeah. I think that's born out of, I mean, I'm not justifying it, I'm just trying to explain it. I think that there are years and years of conflict within that area. Um, that's really, really unfortunate.
Mhm. Now, Paul Kamish comments, let's see, they say that when you die, you become closer to God because you no longer exist, right? Um, that has not been my experience. My experience with the Christian religion is that when you die, you continue to exist in heaven with God. You don't just become closer to God, but you actually go and live with Him, and that you essentially are still yourself. The big difference is that you have a new body, and your new body is a perfect body. That's always what I was taught.
Do you want to hear the nightmare that is what happens after you die in Islam?
Hmm.
So I think that a lot of the monotheistic religions will agree that one day you're going to be judged, and that's when you'll be sent to heaven or to hell. But until that day, in Islam, after you die, we believe in something called the barzakh, or the middle plane, where you will be set with trials. It's called adab al-qabr, or the punishment of the grave. So you'll be asked three questions: Who is your God? What is your religion? And who is your messenger? And if you can't answer those questions, you'll be shown a window into heaven and a window into hell, and you will be told this is what you could have had, and this is what you're going to have. So in your grave, until the day of judgment, you are lying there watching these two windows. Um, we also believe that, well, I say we Muslims also believe that after you die, you will still be able to feel everything to a much higher level.
Mm,
Um, so the weight of a fly on your skin will be the weight of a mountain.
hmm
Um, so when people, because we also believe in like a burial ritual, when people are made to wash the body, they have to be extremely gentle with the body because the body feels a lot more pain than it did in its actual life. So yeah.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of difference from one Christian group to another. The Catholic group has something that's somewhat similar to what you've described, in that they have purgatory.
Mm,
Although even among the Catholics, there's a disagreement now as to whether or not purgatory exists. But it's not quite, it's not the same, but it's somewhat similar in that it's a place that you go and you wait, and you're supposed to pay for any of your sins that were not offset by good deeds or offset by acts of faith. And when you have finished paying for all of your sins, then you get to go to heaven.
oh,
Um,
there's no paying your way out of hell in Islam.
Well, that's the thing, is purgatory was in the middle between heaven and hell.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't really have that. From what I understand, there will be, so after the day of judgment, so after you've been judged, you are then set to run across a bridge. And people who are righteous, they'll find it really, really easy to cross
Mm,
the Sirat al Mustaqim, or the Sirat, or the bridge, or whatever. And people who were believers, but were not very good in their life, or they committed a lot of sins, they will find it extremely difficult to cross this bridge. So some people will be able to cross it at the speed of light, like they'll run across it, and other people will be crawling, and this bridge will be stationed above hellfire.
mm,
So there will be
mhm,
loads of people who will be believers but will fall into hellfire and then be there for a time to like absolve them of their sins, or like burn away their impurities before they can reach heaven.
mm. That's interesting. I thought this comment from Brainbug was amusing. If the cops ask, you don't know anything about the body. um, you know, that brings up something that I read recently from Ativist, who had an analogy about a bridge, partly because when you talk to Christians, they say that Jesus is supposed to be the bridge between man and God, and that by crossing that bridge, that then you can have life with God. And his point was that if the bridge is defective, and it's defective if people can't find it, or if people are walking across it and they fall off of it, but in one way or another, they can't cross the bridge. Is that the fault of the people walking on the bridge, or is that the fault of the engineer who built the bridge?
Well, the bridge apparently in Islam is based on how righteous you were in your life.
Hmm.
So the description of the bridge is that it's as thin as a blade, and no, it's as thin as a hair and it's as sharp as a blade. So
Mm.
people who are righteous will be able to run across it, but people who have sinned will have a very, very hard time getting across it. And also, it should be worth noting that there is only judgment for Muslims. There is
Mm.
no judgment for disbelievers. They're just sent immediately to hell on the day.
Interesting. I have heard that Muslim people have some respect for Christians and Jewish people because they are people of the book.
Yeah.
Obviously they're not as good as Muslims, but they're not as bad as infidels.
So there is a distinguish. I'm not entirely sure why they were distinguished. I guess it's because they're monotheistic or considered monotheistic. But the greatest sin in Islam is polytheism, or shirk, or adjoining partners to God. So the Christians and the Jews, or the Ahl Kitab, or the people of the book, as you've mentioned, aren't as bad as polytheists because they don't join gods with God. Um, so that's why they're slightly better. And also, we have a lot of prophets in common with Judaism and Christianity. So we have a
Hmm.
version of Jesus, we have a version of Moses, Abraham, and all of those other prophets. The stories do differ slightly, though.
Okay. Okay. Now you mentioned that it is not permitted to draw a picture of Muhammad. Is it permitted to draw a picture of other prophets?
It's not permitted to draw pictures of humans or animals at all in Islam.
Okay, so you couldn't draw a picture of your mother either.
No.
Interesting. Because one of the things that's a very common thing to do in American schools, an assignment to draw a picture of your family. So,
Yeah,
a
it
Muslim
depends.
child wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, the rules get watered down here and there, but classical Islam, and in classical Islam, you are not allowed to draw a graven image or the image of
Okay.
someone living or dead.
Is that Is that based on the 10 commandments, that, you shall not worship any graven image?
It's not based on the Ten Commandments, I don't think, but there are narrations from sayings or teachings from the Prophet Muhammad that say things like, any house with an image in it, the angels of mercy cannot enter that house. And if you draw an image, or the person who makes an image, God will bring him on the day of judgment and ask him to breathe life into that image. And
Mm,
if he's not able to, he will send that person to hellfire. Sorry.
okay.
I don't know why it has such a heavy penalty, but it is one of the worst things you can do in Islam.
Interesting. So Jenny Morgan asks, so why are there gigantic sized posters of the Khomeini in Iran?
So Khamenei is the leader in Iran because
Yeah.
people choose what they want to follow in religion. Ultimately, also they're Shias, so their rulings might differ a little bit.
Ah, okay. Okay. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I don't know what you have questions about. You look very puzzled.
Well, I had a thought that I wanted to talk about, and then now I've forgotten about it. I probably should have taken a piece of paper and a pen. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about. One of the things we were talking about was going to heaven, and that is something that actually varies greatly among different religious sects because when it comes to just a minute, I've got an echo here, and I'm not sure where.
Okay. Should I mute
Okay.
myself?
I muted myself for a moment to see if that would fix it, and I didn't hear it anymore, but I'm not sure. But anyway, um, the whole idea of the rapture is something that is very debated in Christianity. And some
Mm.
people say that when you die, you remain asleep until the rapture. And then when Jesus comes back at the rapture, then everyone is resurrected, and then that's when the judgment comes. But some people say there's an exception for the saints. And then the Protestants say that everyone who is a believer is a saint, but the Catholics say that no, you have to go through a sainthood process to be a saint, and saints go straight to heaven. Yeah, it's really confusing because if everyone's a saint, then nobody stays asleep until the judgment. And clearly in Revelation, when Jesus comes back, he's supposed to call up all these people out of their graves, and uh, and then we have the zombie apocalypse, I guess.
So in terms of the end times, as we call it, or a sa'a, or the hour, um, I don't think we believe specifically in a rapture. When it comes to death and who gets to go straight to heaven, we
Mhm.
believe that only prophets and martyrs go straight to heaven, or to
Okay.
paradise. Um, and people who die as martyrs are like people who die in battle. We also believe that those bodies don't decompose at all. They're kept preserved by the will of God or whatever. But when it comes to quote unquote the rapture, towards the end times, we do believe in the second coming of Jesus, but
Mm,
he will be a Muslim and he will preach the message of Muhammad. And he's currently God has raised him up to God. Um, and he's alive right now and he's watching all of us or whatever, and he's going to come down during the end times, but also we'll have the antichrist, and there's going to
mhm.
be a giant war between Jesus, who's leading all the believers, and he's going to come back and break the cross and kill all the pigs. Don't know why. It's not worth asking me. um, and the antichrist, or the Dajjal, will be leading the Jews and all the disbelievers. um, and they're gonna like fight it out or whatever. But we also believe in a trumpet blast that will kill everything, destroy the whole world. But all of the believers will have their souls removed prior to the trumpet blast. So it's only the disbelievers who will actually hear it and die because of it. And then the trumpet blast will blast a second time, and everyone will be raised for the day of judgment. And then the angel of death will be brought forward as a ram and slaughtered to signify that everyone will have eternal life. And then the judgment begins. All the disbelievers are sent to hell, and all of the believers are then judged before God.
Now, a number of the things that you're saying there are very similar to what is in the book of Revelation at the end of the Bible. Does Islam accept the Bible in addition to the Quran, or are these things that are in the Quran as well?
I keep saying we, I'm not a Muslim, I do want to clarify.
That's okay.
These are things that I used to subscribe to. But Muslims do have an understanding that, so the Zabur or the Psalm, the Torah and the Injil or the Gospel were actual books that were given to the prophets. They've just been altered since then, so they're no longer like valid as religious scriptures. And the Quran is meant to be like the final revelation, like the last and final testament of God. So yeah, I think that that's just a lazy explanation for why so much of the Quran is plagiarized from the Old Testament and the New Testament. But that's the story that Muhammad ran with, is that's why so many things line up. And the reason why things don't line up is because those books are wrong.
Okay.
They've been tampered with. Um,
Now, I understand that Muslims say that they believe that the Quran is much more pure than the Bible, and they say that the Bible got corrupted, and yet the Quran was passed down for several generations before it was ever written down. Why do they say that it was able to escape the same type of corruption? Do you know?
So the myth around the Quran is that it's never been changed, that it is as the same as it was when it was revealed. And this is something that has been taught to almost every single Muslim child to date, is that the Quran is completely unchanged. No one has touched it. It is the same as when it came out of Muhammad's mouth 1400 years ago. And I am sorry to say that that is not the case, because the Quran was an oral tradition to begin with. Only one copy that was written down in the time of Muhammad. And I think something that a lot of people need to take into consideration is the Arabic of that time was very, very different to the Arabic we have now. The Arabic in that time, if you look at the Arabic lettering, there's a lot of letters that look very, very similar, save for the dots that exist on them. In the Arabic in that time, and also the fact that Muhammad was not a literate person, so there's that. But the Arabic at that time had no dots at all. So a lot of the letters, and if you look at the expansion of Islam during the reign of the second caliph, which was about 10 years after Muhammad died, the expansion of Islam was from Spain to China. All of these people do not know how to speak Arabic, and they're all learning the Quran by memory. And the Arabic script at this point had no dots and had no vowels. So there's a lot of margin for error. And I think at current, there are 14 different versions of the Quran in terms of not just in recitation, but also in terms of how the verses are structured and the way that the words are used. There are plurals where there shouldn't be plurals. There are certain words that aren't supposed to be those words. Actually, it wasn't until the caliphate of Muawiyah where he instated these dots and these vowels so that everyone could read the script. Because prior to that, only pure-blooded Fusha Arabs, like not even Arabs, Fusha Arabs, could read that script.
Mm.
So yeah, and even if you go to Arabia now, Arabic is not a single dialect. Quranic Arabic is Fusha Arabic, but Arabic in the whole subcontinent varies from place to place. So you even Arabs who live in like Syria won't be able to pick up a Quran and translate it immediately. It's a very, very difficult version of Arabic.
Aunt Jer had a question,
Yeah.
and it relates to some things that you said earlier. She says, maybe I missed it because I was late, but did Faye describe what hell is like in Islam? Faye did describe, people going to hell and the reasons why people go to hell, and some things about judgment, but not actually what it was like to be in hell. Is it the same as the Christian hell?
So I think because there's so many different hell is much more elaborately described than heaven ever could hope to be, because the fear of hell is really meant to prevent you from wanting to go there. It's said that the skin of like the sensitivity of your skin is 40 times more, and the fire in hell is 70 times stronger than earthly fire. So not only will you be feeling more, but the heat will also be stronger. There's also areas of hell that are excessively cold as well as excessively hot. The least punishment in hell will be given to one of Muhammad's uncles because he was a patron of Muhammad, but he never accepted Islam. And he will only be put in fire up to his ankles, but the fire will be so hot, it will boil his brain.
Oh, goodness.
The strongest punishment, like there's definitely layers in hell, but I don't know how far it goes or what the worst punishment is. But I know that that is the least punishment in hell, is being up to your ankles. So the rest of his body will not be in hellfire, but the fire will be so strong that it will boil his brains. There's also this narration in the Quran about there being like a type of fruit in hell that is spiky, that it looks like the head of a devil. It's called a zakum or something like that. So there's food in hell, as far as we're aware. The people will be made to drink boiling oil and pus and blood. There are different sections of hell for different sins. So, for example, people who committed adultery will be put into an oven naked together that will burn from the bottom up, and it will be triangular shaped or something like that. It's fucking crazy, is what I'm saying. It's just
Yeah. Aunt Jer asks, if you're dead, do you even have a brain?
just trying
Now, does hell last for eternity, or is there at some point where you become annihilated?
Hell is eternal. The narration that talks about the skin, the sensitivity of the skin, it actually says that it will grow back so that it can be roasted again. So it's kind of like a Promethean hell.
Okay. And Nerdy Rodent asks, is pineapple on pizza one of the foods in hell?
You know what? Pineapple on pizza deserves to be in hell. I don't understand it. And if it belongs anywhere, it belongs in hell.
Let's see. There was one other thing I wanted to. Yeah, Geo Sam is right. It sounds a lot like Dante's Inferno.
Dante's Inferno, I think someone mentioned it above as well. Dante was heavily inspired by Islamic narrations of heaven and hell. And that's why it sounds like it. He was heavily, heavily, heavily inspired by not just Christian, like afterlife mythology, but also Islamic mythology, which is why it sounds very, very similar. Actually, there is a passage in Dante's Inferno where he meets Muhammad, which is blasphemous, but I don't know why people don't pick up on that.
I've never read it myself, so I wasn't aware of that. That's quite interesting.
It's a really good read. He also happens to find all of his political adversaries in hell.
Okay, Ricardo Oliveira says, not even hell is punishment enough for that.
For pineapple.
Pineapple on pizza seems to be the most controversial topic in most of the streams.
This is
I'm not sure why.
this is how we know the West has progressed. We're no longer fighting about who believes what. We're fighting about what goes on pizza. And I do
Uh, and then Brainbug says, I typed a long-winded response about Dante, and then Geo summed it up so much more concisely. Let's see, there was one other thing I wanted to bring up. What was it? That don't get old. Your memory starts to go, and you
Well, can I just express something?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm 25 years old, and I already feel like I'm slowly deteriorating. Every single joint in my body when I wake up just clicks. I feel like a robot in the morning. Like my collarbone clicks into place. I don't know what that's about or how that happened, but I feel like I'm going through a second puberty, and I don't know how to deal with it.
Well, you're at the age when your body has just reached maximum development. And you're right. You're at the point where it's just starting to decline. But fortunately, you've got about you should have a good 60 years of declining, and the first let's see, you should have about 30 years of prime first, and before you even notice any changes of decline.
I mean, I don't know. I think internally, I'm still very much like a 5-year-old sometimes. And I want to maintain that inner child. But yeah, my body definitely feels like it's on a downward slope. The moment I hit 25, just everything just starts falling apart. But I think as long as I keep a strong internal capacity, I think I'll be fine.
Nerdy says maximally developed Fay, power level over 9,000. Okay. I had one more question about the Islamic faith, and I can't remember what it was, but I'll just save it for another day, because I'm sure that the two of us will get together in another stream another time, and I'll probably bring it up at that time.
Yeah, I'm happy to do another one of these, because it's not often that I get to talk about comparative mythology. So yeah. It's been fun talking about heaven and hell. Maybe we could go over heaven next time, because there isn't a lot to describe, but there's some.
Yeah, that would make a good stream, a stream on heaven and hell, or even just on heaven. Yeah. I've read a couple of books from some people who claim that they have been there, and have gone through near-death experiences, and it is interesting. And I read those books when I was a Christian. And two of them, well, one of them I accepted as most likely true. One of them I accepted as possibly true. And one of them I rejected as most likely false. Mostly because the one that I rejected as most likely false, she wasn't really a Christian. And so I didn't see how a person could have a heaven type experience, from a non-Christian standpoint.
Ooh, prejudice.
So yeah, that does sound like a good idea for a stream.
Yeah.
Fay, let me give you a couple of minutes to shill anything that you've got coming up.
Honestly, right now I don't have much coming up. I've been taking a very well-needed rest break from everything. I have done some video recording while I'm out here in Liverpool, but Saf has been reluctant to be on camera, and I've just not felt like it. I've just been having a great time being a little bit of a child, honestly, for the last 5 days, and it's been great. Today was probably one of the more serious days that I've had, where I've come upon the news of this boy being doxxed, and we're trying to get him as much help as possible. So I would like to remind anybody who hasn't looked at that link in the description, please do. And please do report those accounts and the tweets that they've made threatening this young man with being arrested for blasphemy, because that's our main concern right now. But aside from that, if you want to subscribe, my channel is Fay the Most Gracious. I upload there as regularly as I can. But yeah, if you want more shorter exposures to me, please do follow me on Twitter. I'm at Rotten Fire on Twitter, and my feed is normally quite interesting. So yeah.
Okay. Oh, Dave said, tell Faye to come over to Whirl.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either. I don't know if that's a channel or what that is.
Yeah, maybe in England somewhere.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you for comments. Thank you for questions. Thank you so much, Faye, for coming. And just want to tell everyone to, yes, support this young man in Pakistan, stand up for the oppressed wherever you see them, and live your life. Bye.